Under the blazing sun of the western plains, where the wind carved whispers through the tall grasses and the distant mountains held secrets older than any settler could imagine. She walked alone. Her boots sank slightly into the dust, each step carrying the weight of a past she could not escape. Her dark hair was tangled by the wind, and her eyes held a fierce resolve that startled even the most hardened men of the frontier. She was not a woman accustomed to fear, yet the thought of what lay ahead made her chest tighten as if the desert itself pressed against her ribs. She had come to this place, knowing the stories, the whispers of a powerful Apache leader whose name was spoken with both reverence and dread. He was a man who commanded loyalty and fear in equal measure, a warrior whose presence alone could bend a room into silence. Many had tried to cross him, and many had vanished without a trace. But she was no ordinary woman, and her story was far from ordinary. She was a widow, bound by chains of circumstance, yet her spirit had not been broken. Every scar she carried told of battles survived, of family lost, of promises kept against impossible odds. And now, standing on the edge of an unknown destiny, she prepared to meet the man who could either claim her or destroy her. The camp lay in the shadow of a steep canyon, smoke curling from fire pits where warriors sat in a tense quiet, their eyes sharp and wary. Horses pawed at the ground, snorting clouds of dust into the air as the sun climbed higher, painting the sky in shades of copper and gold. She approached slowly, hands visible, heart pounding, but head held high. This was no place for hesitation, and she knew that one misstep could cost her life. The Apache leader had demanded a wife from among those brought to him, and the whispers said she was to be the next. But she was not what he expected. She was not meek, not silent, not easily claimed. The moment she came into view, the camp fell into a hushed tension. Every eye tracked her, every warrior ready to act if she showed weakness. She could feel their suspicion like a tangible weight, pressing her back toward the dusty trail she had traveled. Yet she did not retreat. Instead, she walked closer, her voice steady when she finally spoke, carrying over the crackle of the fires. "This isn't wrong," she said, her words firm but measured. "I belong to you." The leader rose from his position, tall and imposing, his presence immediately filling the space around him. His gaze was sharp, piercing, yet not cruel. There was a curiosity in it, a hunger to understand what had brought her here, what had given her the courage to step into his world unafraid. She could feel the weight of his scrutiny, the silent questions pressing down on her as she stood firm. Around them, the camp watched with bated breath, waiting for a reaction that could either ignite violence or grant her passage. She could see the edge of a smile flicker across his face, almost imperceptible, like sunlight reflecting off the river far below. It was not a smile of amusement, but of acknowledgement, a recognition of something she carried within her that others lacked. Her declaration hung between them, charged with tension, defying expectations, bending the rules of a world built on control and fear. The men shifted uneasily, sensing that what was unfolding before them was unlike any confrontation they had ever witnessed. In the silence, she found her own heartbeat, steady and resolute, grounding her in the reality of her choice. Every chain of the past, the loss, the pain, the battles fought to survive had led her to this moment. She had faced men who sought to dominate her, storms that threatened to consume her, and yet here she stood, ready to claim her own destiny. Even within the shadow of a man who could wield life and death with a single command, the leader's hand hovered near. A silent warning and a test, yet he did not strike. Instead, he stepped closer, the crunch of the desert sand beneath his boots, loud in the tense quiet. "You speak boldly," he said, his voice low, carrying authority, but also a threat of intrigue. "Few dare to stand before me and speak as if they are not afraid." "Fear will not serve me," she replied. "Neither will silence. I am here to be seen for what I am, for what I bring to this world, even if that means standing in the fire of your judgment." A murmur ran through the camp, a ripple of astonishment and uncertainty. None had heard a woman speak with such defiance, with such clarity of purpose. It was dangerous, perhaps even reckless, but there was a power in her presence that could not be ignored. As though trying to decipher the essence of a soul so unbound by the rules of his realm, he studied her carefully, the sun casting his shadow long and commanding across the sand. The air between them seemed to crackle with a silent energy, a moment suspended in time. Warriors exchanged glances, some tense with caution, others curious at the unfolding drama. She was a force, and he knew it, even if he could not yet name the measure of her strength. Then he spoke again, his tone softer, edged with the weight of authority and the hint of a challenge. "If you belong to me," he said, "then you must prove that you do not belong to fear, that you do not belong to weakness. Words alone are not enough in this land." She nodded, understanding the meaning without needing further explanation. Her life had been a series of proofs, tests of endurance and courage, and she had passed each one, leaving scars as evidence. "Then I will prove it," she said simply. "Not because I owe you, not because I am ordered, but because I choose to face what must be faced. I am not a shadow to follow. I am fire to walk beside you or in front of you. If that is what is demanded." A tense silence followed, the kind that stretched like the endless plains around them, holding its breath as if the land itself was waiting for the outcome. The Apache leader regarded her for a long moment, measuring, weighing, discerning. His face betrayed little, yet his eyes told of the calculations and judgments swirling behind the mask of command. She could feel his awareness like a tide, and she did not shrink from it. She met him eye to eye, unwavering, the air thick with possibility and danger. The wind shifted, carrying dust across the camp, and the leader finally nodded once, slowly, deliberately. It was not a concession, not a guarantee of safety, but it was acknowledgement or recognition that she was no ordinary widow, no ordinary figure in a world ruled by rigid law and expectation. There was an unspoken agreement forming in that gaze, a spark of connection that neither fully understood but both could not ignore. Yet even as relief threatened to settle in, she sensed the shadows of uncertainty lurking. This was not the end, and the moment of confrontation had only just begun. The camp remained alert, the warriors tense, and the sun climbed higher, casting a merciless light over a land where survival demanded more than courage. It demanded cunning, strength, and an unbreakable will. She took a step closer, the ground shifting beneath her boots, and felt the pull of destiny tightening around her. There would be challenges ahead, tests of loyalty and resilience, battles not only of body, but of spirit. And as she stood there, facing the leader whose power could claim life and death, she knew one undeniable truth. Whatever came next, she would not be passive. She would not be silent. The leader studied her a moment longer, then gestured toward the inner part of the camp. "Follow," he said, and the word carried a weight she had not expected. It was not an order, not yet, but it was a summons, a door opening into a world she could not yet fully see. With each step she took toward it, the tension grew, a storm gathering at the edge of the horizon, promising that the story of this widow, this force of fire and defiance, was only beginning. And so she moved forward, into the uncertain heart of a world ruled by strength and shadow. Every step echoing with the unspoken truth, she belonged to no one but herself. Yet in the hands of a man whose power was absolute, the lines between choice and destiny blurred, and the plains held their breath. Waiting to see what would unfold next, the wind picked up, carrying dust and whispers. And as she crossed the threshold into the camp's center, the sun dipped slightly behind the canyon wall. The future was unknown. Danger and desire intertwined, and the story was far from over. A single glance between her and the leader promised trials, revelations, and a fire that could not be contained. The tension hung, unresolved. The cliff of fate waiting to reveal its next chapter, the plains watched silently, as if they too knew that what was about to happen would change everything. The camp's inner circle was a world unto itself, filled with the low murmur of voices, the clatter of tools, and the distant cry of hawks circling overhead. The widow moved carefully, each step measured, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes following her. The way water was carried and rationed, the sharp glint of knives tucked into belts. Everything spoke of discipline, of a people who lived by rules written not on paper, but in memory and blood. It was a world both alien and fascinating. A place where strength and respect were intertwined in ways she could barely understand. The Apache leader's name was Cale, though it carried in whispers, as if spoken aloud could summon storms. His reputation was legendary, built on victories over men who underestimated him and over women who dared to challenge the boundaries of their captivity. She knew the stories well, how he had turned raids into lessons, punishments into careful teachings, and how loyalty to him was both a shield and a sword. Yet standing before him, she sensed there was more to Cale than the fearsome image the rumors painted. There was intelligence there, a cunning that measured more than brute force, a mind that weighed hearts as much as actions. As they moved deeper into the camp, the widow's eyes fell on the people around her. Warriors with painted faces, women tending fires, children playing under the watchful eyes of guardians. It was a living, breathing community. She could see the tension that lingered, the uncertainty in glances, but she also noticed respect. Her courage had earned attention, and even if no one dared speak, finally stopped near a raised platform at the center of the camp. From here, he could see everything, command everything, and yet he remained still, waiting. "You have come far," he said, voice carrying over the muted bustle of the camp. "Many would have turned back at the first sign of fire in my eyes. You have not, that is, unusual." She met his gaze, steady and unwavering. "I did not come for fear," she replied, "nor did I come to follow what is expected of me. I came because there is no other path left for me." The words hung between them, heavy and deliberate. Cale's eyes narrowed slightly as if weighing the meaning behind her defiance. He was a man who understood survival, who had seen countless lives swallowed by choices they did not fully own. And yet in her, he sensed a spark of something rare, fire that could neither be tamed nor ignored. "Tell me your name," said after a pause. "Alara," she said. The syllables firm, grounded in identity. Alara of the Plains. A subtle shift passed over Cale's face, a flicker of acknowledgement, as if a key had turned somewhere deep in his mind. He did not smile, but the weight of his scrutiny softened slightly, and he gestured for her to follow him toward a smaller tent near the edge of the camp. Inside, the air was cooler, shadowed, and filled with the smell of herbs and earth. It smelled of survival, of knowledge passed down through generations. As she stepped inside, Alara's mind wandered briefly to the life she had left behind, the homestead reduced to ashes, the people who had vanished under the cruelty of men who called themselves owners, the nights spent hiding under stars with only the wind for company. She had survived what most would not, and every memory was a blade honed, sharp by pain and determination. Yet she could not deny the unease threading through her, the uncertainty of what awaited her here. Cale's world was different, dangerous in ways she had yet to comprehend fully. Cale studied her silently, as if reading the lines of her life etched across her face. "Your past is heavy," he said finally, voice quiet but edged with power. "It will follow you if you let it. Out here, we measure people not by what they have lost, but by what they carry forward. Tell me, what do you carry, Alara?" She hesitated for the briefest moment, then spoke, voice low but steady. "I carry the fire of survival. I carry the memory of those I could not save. I carry the will to remain unbroken, no matter the chains placed before me." Cale's gaze did not waver. There was a flicker of respect, almost imperceptible, and for the first time, Alara sensed a possibility beyond fear. "Few speak with such clarity," he said. "Most speak in pleas or in silence. You speak as if the plains themselves live within you." Outside, the camp continued its rhythm, yet the tension had shifted subtly. There was a sense that something unusual had entered their midst, force not bound by expectation or the normal currents of power. Alara felt it too, the pulse of attention. The quiet expectation that her presence would alter more than one life. Cale moved closer, hands clasped behind his back. "You are not the woman I expected," he said. "Not in the way the whispers described. You have chosen to arrive on your own terms, and that is rare." Alara lifted her chin, meeting him directly. "I do not intend to meet expectations," she said. "I intend to meet truth." The leader regarded her for a long moment, and in that silence, Alara felt the weight of every story she had ever heard about him, the victories, the power, the control. But there was another story emerging now, one unspoken yet tangible, the story of a woman who could stand unafraid, who could command attention without weapons or armies, who could challenge even the fiercest leader, not with rebellion, but with honesty. Cale finally nodded once, slowly, as if confirming something to himself. "Then you will stay," he said. "Not because I demand it, but because here. Your choices must be made every day, under the eyes of the land and the people who survive it. You will be tested, Alara. You will be measured. And only then will your place be known." Her heart quickened at the weight of his words, not with fear, but with awareness. Every step forward in this camp would demand courage, wisdom, and the strength to endure. She was entering a world that could either break her or forge her into something stronger than she had ever imagined. The path ahead was uncertain, and the shadow of Cale's power loomed large, shaping the contours of her destiny even as she clung to her own independence. Outside, the wind shifted again, carrying dust, the scent of earth, and the faint sound of distant drums. There were signals, warnings, echoes of stories that had unfolded long before she arrived. Alara could feel the pulse of the land, the heartbeat of the camp, and the silent watch of every pair of eyes that had followed her from the edge of the canyon. She understood that survival here would not only be about skill or strength, but about perception, understanding, and the ability to navigate a world that tested everything a person thought they knew about loyalty, trust, and power. Cale motioned for her to sit, and though she hesitated, she obeyed, sensing that every gesture, every pause carried significance. "We are not enemies," he said, "but neither are we friends yet. You have arrived, but the story of what you are to become is still unwritten." Lara met his gaze, and for the first time she allowed herself a small measure of relief. Not comfort, but clarity. She had come here with courage, but the next steps would require strategy, patience, and a willingness to face truths she had avoided for too long. She had learned to survive. Survival was different from understanding a world as complex as Cale's. The sun dipped lower behind the canyon walls, casting long shadows that twisted across the camp, painting the fires in gold and crimson. The warriors and women continued their work, the children's laughter echoing faintly, but an underlying tension lingered. Alara knew it would not disappear. It could not. The leader's eyes never left her, a reminder that nothing here was certain, and every choice would be measured. And in that silence, Alara felt the weight of destiny pressing against her, the uncertainty of the days to come, and the invisible threads of power and expectation that bound her to a man whose presence was as commanding as the land itself. Every breath she took carried the promise of trials, the whisper of secrets yet untold, and the knowledge that in this world, courage alone would not be enough. The night would fall soon, and with it, the camp would settle into its rhythms. But Alara knew that the moment she had entered this world was only the beginning, that the story of the widow who dared to speak her truth in the shadow of an Apache leader was far from over. The wind carried the promise of storms, the scent of earth and fire mingling with the pulse of life and death, and somewhere deep within her, a determination burned brighter than ever. The land held its breath, the shadows stretched long, and Alara understood that the days ahead would test her in ways she could not yet imagine. But she also understood this. She had arrived on her own terms, and that alone would be enough to shape the path forward for better or for worse. The night approached, and the tension remained unresolved, a storm gathering on the horizon, waiting to reveal what would come next. night fell over the camp, draping the desert in shades of black and silver, the fires throwing long flickering shadows across faces etched with experience and suspicion. Alara sat near the edge of the main circle, wrapped in a blanket coarse against her skin, yet warm from the fire's glow. Her mind refused rest. Every glance, every movement in the camp carried layers of meaning she had yet to decode. Cale had given her a place, yet that place felt like the center of a storm she had not yet learned to navigate. The first subtle challenge came almost immediately. A warrior named Corvain approached her, as if testing the boundaries of her courage. His hair was tied in braids, streaked with ash from the day's fires, his eyes sharp with a mix of curiosity and doubt. "You claim strength," he said, voice low, almost a growl. "But words alone do not carry a life through the plains. Can you carry fire in your hands without burning yourself?" Alara did not flinch. Her gaze held his, steady and unwavering. "I have carried fire," she said softly, "and I have endured its flames without surrendering to them. Ask yourself what you have endured, Corvain, and whether it made you stronger or weaker." Corvain studied her, a flicker of surprise passing over his features. Few dared speak to him with such clarity, and fewer still dared speak without fear. After a long moment, he nodded once, almost imperceptibly, and retreated into the shadows, leaving Alara with the quiet sense that the camp had already begun testing her in subtle ways. Cale watched from a distance, his expression unreadable. Alara could feel his eyes on her, even when she did not see him, a constant weight and measure of her every move. There was a tension between them, unspoken yet palpable, a mixture of respect, curiosity, and the faintest trace of challenge. It was clear that Cale did not simply command obedience. He measured intent, strength, character in ways far more intricate than most men of the plains. As the fire crackled, Lara's mind drifted to the whispers she had heard about the camp. Stories of loyalty tested through fire and water, of warriors who had risen or fallen not by force alone, but by cunning, endurance, and the will to survive. Each story carried warnings, yet they also hinted at the depth of life here, plots of alliances, hidden rivalries, and secrets buried beneath the rhythm of daily survival. Alara knew she would have to navigate each carefully. One misstep, one careless word, could tip the delicate balance of trust and suspicion that governed this world. The following morning brought a harsh clarity. Cale summoned her to the edge of the canyon, where the wind whipped through the rock formations and dust danced in the shafts of sunlight. The silence heavy and deliberate. "You have been observed," he said finally, voice steady, carrying authority and weight. "Every choice, every movement, every word has been noted. This is not a place for indecision. Strength is measured not in survival alone, but in the decisions made when no one else is watching." Lara nodded, understanding the depth of the warning. She had survived hardship before, but the camp demanded more than endurance. It demanded strategy, intuition, and the ability to read the unseen currents of power that moved silently beneath every action. "I understand," she said. "I will meet each challenge as it comes, with both caution and resolve." Cale's eyes narrowed, and for a brief moment, the wind carried the scent of distant rain, though the sky remained clear. "You will face tests," he said, "not only of strength, but of loyalty. You will see that survival here is entwined with the lives of others, and choices made in isolation can cost more than life itself." Lara's stomach tightened. She had faced loss before, but the implication was clear here. The stakes were more than personal. One misjudgment could ripple across the camp, affecting not only herself but those whose fates were linked to Cale's command. Over the next few days, Lara began to learn the rhythms of the camp. She observed how warriors trained, how the women prepared meals and tended the fires, how children moved freely under careful supervision. She noticed subtle hierarchies, whispered alliances, and quiet rivalries that could ignite at any moment. The lessons were unspoken, learned through observation. Through the way eyes lingered, through the way hands rested on weapons, she was learning to move with awareness, to measure her own actions against the invisible currents flowing through the camp. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the canyon walls, Alara overheard a conversation that hinted at a deeper layer of tension. Two warriors spoke in low tones, voices cautious yet urgent. "The traitors are moving again," one said. "If Kale does not act, it will be chaos." Alara's mind raced. Traitors were not always mere visitors. They carried news, weapons, and opportunity, and sometimes they brought danger. She realized that her presence here was not simply a matter of endurance, but could intersect with events far larger than herself. Each moment in the camp was a thread. Pulling at the wrong one could unravel more than she imagined. That night, as she lay near the fire, Kale approached without a word. His presence was calm, deliberate, yet there was an intensity to his gaze that left Alara alert. "You have observed," he said quietly, "but observation alone is not enough. You must understand what is unspoken, what is feared, what is sought. Only then will your actions carry meaning." Alara lifted her head, meeting him with steady eyes. "And if I fail?" she asked. Kale's expression did not waver. "Then the consequences will not be yours alone," he said. "This land does not forgive half measures." The weight of his words settled over her like the desert heat in midday. The camp was not merely a place of survival, it was a crucible where every action, every word, and every glance carried power and consequence. She had entered willingly, yet she understood now that each day would be a battle not only of endurance, but of perception, loyalty, and courage. In the following days, Alara began to interact more with the camp, forming subtle connections that would serve her in ways she could not yet predict. A healer named Leora offered quiet guidance on the herbs and medicines that kept the camp strong. A scout named Rylan shared insights about the surrounding lands, the hidden paths and dangers that moved unseen beneath the desert sun. Each interaction was a lesson, a test, a thread in a tapestry she was only beginning to understand. Yet even as she built these connections, tension lingered. Corvin's initial challenge had not disappeared. The traders' movements hinted at larger conflicts beyond the camp, and Kale's eyes, ever watchful, reminded her that her choices would ripple far beyond herself. Every conversation, every glance, every decision carried potential consequences she had yet to fully understand. Alara began to recognize patterns. The subtle ways Kale tested loyalty, the unspoken signals that determined trust, the quiet manipulations that shaped alliances. She understood that the main conflict was not simply survival, but the navigation of power and influence in a place where lives were intertwined like roots beneath the desert soil. She had to remain vigilant, yet also perceptive, discerning not only the intentions of others, but the undercurrents of fear, desire, and ambition that moved beneath every action. One night, as the camp slept under a sky filled with stars sharp and cold, Alara stood at the edge of the canyon, looking out at the distant mountains. The wind carried the scent of sage and dust, the distant howl of wolves, and the faint echo of drums from traders moving unseen. She felt the weight of the camp behind her, the pull of Kale's attention, and the unspoken threads of danger, alliance, and challenge that stretched endlessly before her. She understood that her journey was only beginning, that each day would test not only her body, but her mind and spirit. The night seemed to stretch endlessly, the tension unresolved, the challenges yet to fully reveal themselves. Alara knew that she had found herself in the heart of a storm, a place where courage alone would not suffice, where every action carried weight far greater than she could yet comprehend. And in the quiet of the desert night, with the camp alive but muted under the stars, she realized one undeniable truth. The conflict she faced was far larger than herself. Carrying whispers and dust across the canyon, and Alara's heart beat with anticipation and caution, the story of the widow in Kale's camp was far from over. Challenges loomed, alliances would be tested, and the tension between survival, loyalty, and power would grow ever more dangerous. And the night promised storms yet unseen, leaving Alara and the viewers on the edge of a story still unfolding. The sun rose slowly over the canyon, painting the desert in fierce golds and oranges that made the shadows of the camp stretch long and sharp. Alara awoke to the sound of Kale's voice carrying across the still air, calling her to the center of the camp. Her heart thudded, a mixture of anticipation and cautious resolve. She had learned much in the days she had spent hear the rhythms of the warriors, the unspoken alliances and the careful balance Kale maintained, but she knew that every summons carried weight. Today, she sensed. She noticed the tension in the air. The warriors had gathered in a loose semicircle, eyes sharp and bodies still, their attention fixed on her. Kale stood at the center, taller than she remembered, his gaze steady, weighing her, measuring her. Even from a distance, she could feel the silent weight of authority in the way he moved. The air around him charged with power and expectation. "You have observed," Kale said, his voice low but carrying clearly, "and you have learned. But observation alone does not prove strength, and understanding alone does not prove loyalty. Today you will face a challenge not only of skill, but of character." Lara's stomach tightened, but her resolve remained. "I am ready," she said, and her words carried not only certainty, but the quiet fire that had brought her this far. Kale's eyes swept over the camp, then returned to her. "Then follow me." He led her to the edge of the canyon where a narrow path wound precariously along the cliffside. Below, the canyon dropped sharply into shadows, the rocks jagged and unforgiving. Kale did not speak as they climbed, but each step brought a sharper sense of danger. This was no ordinary test of strength. It was a test of focus, courage, and composure under pressure. "Many have walked this path," Kale said finally, "and many have failed. But failing here is not always fatal. Sometimes it is the choices afterward that determine life or death." Alara swallowed, gripping the rough rock with steady hands. Her mind raced through everything she had learned, every observation she had made in the camp. Corvin's cautious glances, Leora's quiet teachings. Ryland's advice about the lands. All of it now had to serve her in a way that mattered. One mistake, one lapse in judgment, could tip the delicate balance Kale expected her to maintain. Halfway along the cliffside, Kale stopped. "Look down," he said. Alara's gaze followed, and the canyon yawned below like a dark mouth. A strong wind whipped along the edge, tugging at her clothing and hair. She felt the fear settle briefly in her chest, a natural reaction she had learned to manage over years of survival. Here, though, the stakes were higher, the tension sharper, because her courage was being measured as much by what she chose to face as by her ability to move forward. "You must cross," Kale said, "and you must do so with awareness. Every step is a choice. Every choice carries consequence." Lara's heart beat faster. She set her jaw and took a step, then another. The cliffside path was narrow, uneven, and treacherous, the wind threatening to push her off balance at every step. She reminded herself of the lessons she had learned in the camp observation. Anticipation, careful timing, and moved deliberately. Feeling the rock beneath her boots and the pull of gravity, aware of every detail below, the canyon seemed to stretch endlessly. Alara thought of the homestead she had lost, of the hardships that had shaped her, and of the fire that had carried her through every test. She had survived storms, men who sought to dominate, and the harshness of the plains itself. Now she faced a different kind of trial, one where courage alone might not be enough. As she reached the narrowest point of the path, Kale's voice broke the wind. "Stop." Alara froze, every muscle taut. Kale stepped closer, his gaze intense. "What you face here is not just the path," he said. "It is the choice to continue despite fear. It is the choice to remain steady when every instinct tells you to retreat. Tell me, Elrod, you belong to fear, or do you belong to yourself?" She held his gaze, feeling the wind pull at her clothing, her hair whipping across her face. "I belong to myself," she said. "Fear does not dictate my path." Kale studied her for a long moment, then nodded once, slowly, deliberately, then proceed. Every step after that, it felt like a battle of will. The wind roared, and the canyon seemed to shift beneath her boots. Yet Alara moved steadily, her senses heightened, her mind alert. The path was a mirror of the tests she faced within the camp subtle, relentless, and demanding focus and courage beyond the ordinary. Finally, she reached the end. Stepping onto solid ground where the canyon opened to a plateau with fire pits and tall grass swaying in the breeze, she exhaled, a mixture of relief and adrenaline flooding through her. Cale approached silently, his presence both reassuring and formidable. "You have passed the first trial," he said. "But this is only the beginning. What lies ahead will demand not just strength and courage, but judgment, insight, and trust. Choices made now will echo far beyond this camp." Alara nodded, knowing that she had only scratched the surface. Already, the camp had begun to stir with whispers. Murmurs of the widow who dared to cross the canyon path, of the woman who did not flinch in the face of fear. She had won a measure of respect, but she also knew that tension lingered, unbroken, ready to ignite at the slightest provocation. That evening, Cale summoned her to a fire where the camp's elders and trusted warriors had gathered. He did not speak immediately, allowing her to take in the scene, the sharp eyes of Corvain, the quiet observation of Leora, the watchful stance of Rylan. All of them were measuring her, judging not only her actions, but her presence, her decisions, and the way she carried herself under scrutiny. "You have learned much," Cale said finally, voice low, but commanding attention. "But understanding the camp is only part of what is required." Loyalty, trust, and deception are intertwined. One misstep can shift the balance. Lara's stomach tightened, yet she felt a growing fire within. She had come this far, survived tests beyond imagination, and begun to understand the delicate rhythm of this place. Yet the knowledge that more challenges awaited sharpened her focus. She would have to balance courage with cunning, intuition with wisdom, and instinct with careful observation. As the night deepened, listening to the murmurs of conversation and piecing together the unspoken tensions that shaped every interaction, Corvain approached once more, his eyes still wary, but there was an unspoken acknowledgement of her resilience. Leora offered a quiet nod, signaling support without words. Ryland's gaze met hers briefly, sharing knowledge of hidden trails and potential dangers. Each interaction added threads to the tapestry she was learning to navigate. Yet every moment carried the weight of consequences she could not yet fully predict. The tension in the camp was palpable, a current that ran beneath every action and word. Traders had been sighted again on the distant ridges, hinting at conflicts yet to arrive. Alliances within the camp were subtle, fragile, and shifting. Cale's presence loomed like a constant shadow, reminding Alara that her choices mattered far beyond herself. She understood more clearly than ever that the coming days would test not only her skill and courage, but her judgment, loyalty, an understanding of the fragile balance of power that governed the camp. As the stars glittered overhead, Alara returned to the fire, where Cale sat silently, the flickering flames reflecting in his eyes. He did not speak immediately, letting the silence stretch, heavy and charged. When he finally did, his words carried both warning and anticipation. "Tomorrow will bring the trials that determine more than survival," he said. "It will test your mind, your instincts, and your heart. Be ready, Alara, for the camp, the land, and the people will all demand your full measure." Alara felt the weight of his words settle over her like the desert night itself, vast, relentless, and full of hidden dangers. Yet within that weight, there was also clarity. She had come here with fire in her spirit, courage in her heart, and determination in her mind. Whatever awaited her in the coming hours, she would face it with the same strength that had carried her this far. The night stretched on. Thick with anticipation, the desert silent, but alive with the promise of trials and tension. Alara understood that the moment of reckoning was approaching, that the climax of her journey within the camp panned to the most dangerous tests of loyalty. Courage and wit was about to unfold. Every eye in the camp watched, every whisper carried meaning, and the wind carried the scent of uncertainty and challenge. The story hung on the edge of a blade, every thread of conflict taut, every choice pregnant with consequence. Alara's journey had reached the point where courage alone would not suffice. And the resolution, the happy ending that promised peace and belonging. The fires flickered, and the camp waited. Alara's heart beat with anticipation and awareness. Tomorrow would demand everything of her, and the storm of challenge, intrigue, and unspoken tension had only begun to gather. The sun rose over the canyon with a soft golden glow, painting the desert in warmth that felt almost alive after the tense nights. Alara stood at the edge of the camp, the wind brushing against her hair, and for the first time in days, she felt a quiet steadiness inside herself. The trials had been relentless scales tests, the subtle challenges of the camp, and the ever-present tension of uncertain alliances, but each step had strengthened her resolve and sharpened her mind. She had learned that survival was only part of life in the camp. Understanding the people, the land, and the unspoken rules was what gave one true power. Cale approached from the shadows of the rising sun, his expression calm but firm. Not just the path and the tests of strength, but the trials of loyalty, judgment, and patience. Few arrive here with clarity and leave stronger. You have done more than survive, Alara. You have proven yourself. Alara nodded, a mixture of relief and pride filling her chest. It was not easy, she said, but I have learned that strength is more than muscle. It is vision, patience, and understanding. I have seen that now. Have been more than I expected, he said. Your courage was obvious, but your wisdom, that is rare. This camp is stronger. Cale's eyes softened slightly, and for the first time, he allowed a small trace of warmth to surface in his gaze. You for having you among us. As they walked together through the camp, Alara noticed subtle shifts. Corvain approached her with a nod of respect, his earlier suspicion replaced by acknowledgement of her strength. Leora offered a quiet smile, her hands busy with herbs, but her eyes shining with approval. Rylan fell into step beside her briefly, sharing insights about the surrounding land, hinting at secrets that were once dangerous but now became pathways to understanding. Each connection, each trust forged in the fire of trials, seemed to strengthen not only Alara's position, but the community itself. The traders from the ridges had arrived at last, their carts rolling cautiously into view. Yet there was no chaos, no threat. Alara could see that Cale's leadership, combined with her newfound understanding, had created balance. The camp operated with confidence and order, a reflection of the lessons she had learned and the courage she had shown. She watched as Cale met the traders' leader, negotiating with steady authority, and she felt a quiet pride that she had a part in the strength of this moment. Later, around the fires that evening, the camp gathered not as warriors and strangers, but as a community. Alara sat among them, feeling a sense of belonging she had not known for years. The children laughed, chasing shadows, while the women prepared food and the men tended to weapons and duties. Even Corvain, once a quiet test of her resilience, shared a story of his own, opening a thread of camaraderie and shared respect. Cale approached her, and they stood together, watching the stars emerge over the canyon. The tension that had once defined their interactions had softened into mutual recognition. You have changed this place as much as it has changed you, Cale said, and you have done it without demanding power or obedience, only through courage, clarity, and presence. Lara looked at him, and for the first time, she understood the depth of connection that could exist between two strong souls. It was not ownership or command, but recognition and respect, a mutual understanding forged in fire and challenge. I have learned from you, she said softly, and from the people here. Strength is not just survival. It is trust, loyalty, and knowing when to act and when to wait. Cale nodded, a faint smile breaking across his features. Then you belong not because of obligation, but because of choice. You have chosen to be here, and that choice has made all the difference. The firelight flickered across their faces, and Alara felt a sense of peace settle in her chest. She had come to the camp uncertain, facing fear, challenge, and unknown trials. Yet through each moment, she had discovered not only her own strength, but the intricate threads that wove the people and land together. Every test, every confrontation had led her to a place where courage met wisdom, and where her choices shaped not only her destiny, but the destiny of the camp itself. As the night deepened, Alara moved among the people she had come to know, sharing laughter, quiet conversation, and stories of courage and survival. Cale watched from a distance, his gaze steady but proud, knowing that the camp was stronger for having her presence, her courage, and her understanding. Subplots that had once carried tension, the suspicions of warriors, the uncertainties of the traders, the whispered alliances, had begun to resolve in small, meaningful ways. Each thread found balance, and the camp's rhythm became harmonious. The desert air was calm, carrying the scent of sage and earth, and the stars shone like distant fires above the canyon walls. Alara felt a deep sense of belonging, a clarity she had long sought in her life. She realized that true strength was not only surviving storms, but shaping the world around her with awareness, courage, and respect. She had found her place, not by accident or demand, but through choice and perseverance. Cale approached her once more, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. Life will always bring trials, but now you know how to face them, and you know that your courage and wisdom will carry you through. Alara nodded, her eyes reflecting both the firelight and the calm that had settled within her. "I understand," she said, "and I will face whatever comes, not as a shadow of fear, but as someone who knows her own strength and her place in the world." The camp settled into quiet, the fires flickering softly, and for the first time in weeks, Alara allowed herself to relax fully. She had faced the canyon paths, the challenges of Cale's tests, the tension of unseen rivalries, and the uncertainty of every choice. Yet through it all, she had grown stronger, wiser, and more confident in her own path. She had discovered that courage, trust, and understanding could forge bonds that no trial could break, and that her spirit, unbroken and resolute, could shape the lives around her as much as it shaped her own. The night stretched on peacefully, the wind whispering through the canyon, carrying the sense of balance, hope, and quiet triumph. Alara watched the stars, feeling the lessons of the desert, the camp, and the trials imprint upon her soul. She knew that challenges would come again, but she also knew she was no longer alone, that her presence mattered, and that the choices she made could ripple through the lives of those around her, in the glow of the fires. Among people who had once tested her and now accepted her, Alara felt a deep, satisfying sense of resolution. She had survived, grown, and claimed her own place in a world that had once threatened to define her. The suspense and tension that had carried her through the trials had transformed into strength, understanding, and connection. As dawn approached, painting the canyon in soft shades of rose and amber, Alara stood once more at the edge of the camp. She took a deep breath, feeling the wind on her face, and for the first time truly felt that she belonged not because of orders or expectations, but because of the courage, wisdom, and choices that had defined her journey. The camp awoke slowly, each person carrying the quiet knowledge of a day survived and lessons learned. Alara's path had been perilous, her trials intense, but she had emerged stronger, connected, and ready for the life she had chosen to embrace. Cale watched her from a distance, a rare smile touching his features, knowing that the bond forged in fire and challenge was real, enduring, and powerful. The plains stretched endlessly before them, full of possibility, stories, and promise. Alara knew that her life, intertwined with Cale and the people of the camp, would continue with courage, wisdom, and hope. She had faced the greatest challenges of fear, trust, and understanding, and now, standing among people who respected her strength, she realized that the future was hers to shape. The wind carried whispers across the canyon, gentle and persistent, as if the land itself acknowledged her journey. The fires flickered one last time in the soft morning light, and Alara smiled, the tension of past trials dissolving into quiet satisfaction. The story that had begun with fear, uncertainty, and test had reached a natural and meaningful resolution, leaving her and the camp stronger, wiser, and united. And as the sun rose higher over the canyon walls, Alara took her first deliberate steps toward a new chapter. Knowing that she had faced her fears, forged her path, and claimed her place with courage and clarity. The desert, the camp, and the people she had come to know all bore witness to her journey. And she understood that the trials had not only tested her, but had shaped a future filled with possibility, hope, and belonging. The wind shifted once more, carrying dust, earth, and the faint echo of life across the plains. Alara's heart was calm, her spirit resolute, and her place in the world assured. She had arrived as a widow with uncertainty, but she would remain as a force of courage, wisdom, and strength, forever a part of the camp, the land, and the story she had chosen to live. The fires burned. The canyon held its quiet majesty, and Alara finally felt at peace, knowing that she had not only survived but had found a home where courage, choice, and strength would always be honored. The story ended not with fanfare, but with quiet power, reflection, and fulfillment, a testament to survival, courage, and the bonds forged in the fire of life and challenge.